So then I think we will start as usual with cultivating good intention, motivation for being here. So again, we start with quieting our mind by watching the breath. Then we can think, contemplate, reflect, contemplate. Unless we reduce the intensity or high level of our afflicted emotions, such as anger, attachment, ignorance, there's absolutely no enlightenment. There's absolutely no individual liberations. We will not be able to find even a peace in this life. If we have too strong desire, attachments, no matter where we go, no matter what we have, we will always feel dissatisfied and unhappy. And also if we have strong anger, hatred, no matter where we move, no matter what neighbor we have, we will always find conflict and problem with everyone. Therefore, we will not be able to find peace in our heart, in our mind. Therefore, we have to minimize and reduce and eventually overcome all the afflictive emotions, delusions. So we can find more peace, joy in our life, as well as get closer and closer and thereby achieving full enlightenment. May our coming together here to study, learn, become cause and condition to obtain fully enlightened state, so we can be greatest and highest benefit to each and every sentient beings. Okay, so so we can have to the founder, the endowed, transcended, destroyed, the one gone beyond, the four destroyed, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, Lord of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of God and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcended, destroyed, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya plane, I prostrate, make offering, and go for refuge. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the Great Sangha, to all three ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with body as many as all rams, atoms in all aspect, with a supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous action, perform only perfect virtuous action, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha, a star, a visual appearations, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of truth, and a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, sea condition, things as such. Through these merits, may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the four faults, and be delivered from the samsaric oceans uttered by the wave of aging, sickness, and death. I prostrated the Arya gem. Thus did I hear one time the Bhagwan was dwelling on the mass of Vulture Mountain in Rajagaha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagwan was observed in the concentration of the categories of phenomena with profound perception. Also, at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregate also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wish to practice the activities of profound perfection of wisdom? He said then the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wish to practice the activities of profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this correctly and repeatedly, beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness not other than form is also not other than empty. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without resist. Unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, no deviation, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, and no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no door, order, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There's no I element and so on up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There's no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance and so on and up to and including no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there's no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There's no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattva rely on dwelling perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in 3 times also manifestly completely awakened with unsurprisable, perfect, complete enlightenment in the reliance on perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurprised mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that totally pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth since it is not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom declares that gade gade parak parasam gade bodhe soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commanded the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, one should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoiced. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding the entire along the world of God, human, asura, and Gandharvas were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. We can go for the mandala. Yeah. This ground sa shi pe ke chung shin me do da re ra le she ye de gen ba de sang ge shin do mi de u ai do kun nama da shin la che ba jo ye dang bru la na mandala ni ya ta ya. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create to listen to the Dharma, may I become Buddha in order to benefit all sentient. Sangye shodan soge shonam la, chanchu bado dane kesa, dagi shoshe kibe sonam ye, dola penche sangye doba. Sangye shodan soge shonam la, chanchu bado dane kesa, dagi shoshe kibe sonam ye, dola penche sangye doba sho. So, last week we discussed about one of the practice meditations, one of the meditation on emptiness, one particular way of reasoning, logic, analysis, and it's called, the reasoning of one and many, or one and separate. And within that meditation practice, there's 4 essential points. And we went quite a bit last week on the first essential point, that is recognizing the object of negations, because we are here trying to meditate on selflessness. So the self that we are trying to negate in our meditation and practice through reasoning, what is that self that we are trying to negate? Because we are not trying to negate all the self. There are self that need to be negated, which does not exist, but our ignorance grabs to be ignored. And there is a self that exists that we shouldn't negate it. Otherwise, we fall into nihilisms. And so we have to differentiate these two. And in order to understand better the self to be negated through our own experience. So we talked about last time, observing and watching when we have a strong sense of emotion, and when we have a strong sense of I or self or me, and then trying to see how in that moment, how the self or I or me appear, and how we hold that self. So we talked quite a bit last time, and Bob also told me that you have a nice discussions and very engaging discussions, and so I'm happy to hear that, And so then the second point is, the essential point is, the ascertaining the point, essential point of ascertaining the pervasive, which means, if it is inherently existent, then it has to be either one with the basis or separate to the basis, and there's no third possibility or alternative. So being very clear with that, being total convinced with that, So that is the second point, Again, I think I mentioned before, sometimes in some scripture they talk about one and many, and some one and separate or distinguished, So here it is mentioned as one and this. So either it has to be one with the here in term person with the basis, the aggregate, or it has to be separate from the aggregate. There is no other third possibility alternative. It exists inherently. So we have to be very clear with that in our understanding. If we don't have that, then again, the meditation will not become so effective. Coming to conclusions, coming to a really convincing and ascertaining convictions, or understanding. So that is the second point. And the third point is, that the self is not one, inherently one with the aggregates. And the fourth is neither the self is inherently separate from the aggregates. So those are the kind of the 4 point, essential point. And I think, so it is in page number 238. And so in that, where it says, the fourth, where it says, the fourth is see all the damage to the position that the two are established inherently different. So when 4 are completed, so when all these 4 essential points are completed, okay, in this manner, the pure view, realizing suchness or emptiness, that is selfless in a person, is born from that. So when you have a clear understanding of those 4 essential points, then we will have a unmistaken and correct realization of whatever you call emptiness or ultimate truth, or reality, ultimate reality. So that we will have. But if we miss one of those essential points, if we misunderstand or miss one of those essential points, then we will not be able to have that understanding of emptiness of the persons correctly and unmistakably. So those 4 essential are very important point to remember, and also when try to meditate, trying to apply each of those points, going through each of point. So then is going more kind of details now on the 3rd and 4th point. Okay, essential 3rd and 4th point. So then so in the first point and the 3rd point, if the self or the persons and it's basically the aggregates are inherently one, then there are 3 faults. There are 3 faults. And so then, the first fault is, so when it says false repetition, it will be pointless to, assert the self, because if the aggregate and self are one, indivisibly one, then there's no point of distinguishing self and persons. I mean aggregate, because they mean same. There is no, and why it has to be indivisible oneness? Because if something is inherently existent, then it becomes truly existence. Inherently existent, truly existence, ultimately existence, independently existent, they all have same meaning in Prasangika point of view, okay? Exist from its own entity or its own side, all of them. So if something is truly existence, then, the appearance, the way of appearance, the way of thing exists has to be same. If the way thing exists is something else, the appearance is something else to our mind, then it is clearly that it is not truly existence. And that again, it is same in if we look, any information, news, let's say informations, you see some informations, and what you see in the news or information, if that does not concord with the way it exists in reality, then it means it's false. Okay? But the way it is presented, the way we see and the way it really exists is same, of course, concordant, then it means it's true. And same way, so therefore, but if we see, when we talk about self and aggregates, okay, when we say aggregate, my body, my mind, don't we have this in our mind? Don't we have 2 different separate things, I or me and my aggregates, my body, my mind, as a 2 separate entity, If the aggregate self truly exists in one, then it can't have that appearance to our mind. So that having clearly shows that because if something is ultimately existing, truly existing, then the appearance, the way a thing exists, have to be same. But it is not, because if they are same, inherently existing one or same, but in our mind it appears differently. Self and my aggregates like that. So through that also, the sense of my body, my mind, that relative mind is valid mind. So again, it goes against that conventional valid mind. And also the reason to here, it says the reason to establish the self is to establish that self is the agent or the subject, that apprehend the aggregates, is the subjects that experience the objects, the aggregates, the person experiencing its mind, person experiencing its body, to indicate that. But if there are one inherently existing indivisibly, then there is no point of doing that. To assert or establish one as something subject which is experiencing, and the other as the object to be experienced by that subject. So therefore, there is that fault, okay, if they are inherently one. That is the first fault that here it shows, And then that is, as you can see, that is in Nagarjuna's root text of the wisdom. It says, once you think that apart from the aggregate that you apprehend there is no self, the very aggregate of the self, so your self does not exist. Yeah, if they are one, if the aggregate and the self are inherently active one, then there is no point of having a self at all. Just to have aggregate is enough. Then second point, if they are inherently one, then there is another faults or problems. Just as there is only one self, there will be only one aggregates, because they are divisible oneness. But there are 5 aggregates in terms of the persons, human beings. And just as there is 5 aggregates, there will be 5 persons or 5 self. Again, that is not true to the reality, because there is only one self. So therefore, again, the self and aggregate are inherently not one. Okay, not inherently. So there is one second fault if they are inherently one. And the third one, and that kind of whether if they are same, then there will be many. Either there is problem of being many persons or self, or many aggregate becoming just one aggregate and not my. That is again explained by Chandrakirti in his middle way. As you can see the quotation there, that. And the third one is the self would arise and disintegrate. So here, if they are one, the aggregate, arises, or the aggregates at the very beginning, they arise. They arise, or maybe being produced or come into existence, then they remain, abide for some, and then at the end, the aggregate kind of disintegrate, come to the end, So there is there's arising and disintegration of the aggregate. Just as there is arising and disintegrating aggregation, then if they are same, then also the person will have to, in same way, first being existence or arising, and then abiding, and then disintegrating, because they will be same. Just as the aggregate has that kind of nature, the person will have that same nature. Okay, because if they are same in device, if inherently existing, they cannot be divided, divided, and so but if we says, but doesn't self arise, abide, and disintegrate, just like the aggregates. So here, they're saying, conventionally, there is this, on conventional level, on the relative level, just as the aggregates have arising and disintegrating, self also has arising and disintegrating. Self is also impermanent, just like aggregate, self is impermanent. On conventional level, on relative level. But here, the opponent of that, they regard, the self to be inherently existence. Okay, or if we believe the self to be inherently existence, if it is inherently existent, then it cannot be arising and disintegrating. If it is inherently existent, then it becomes permanent, static. Something that is inherently existent cannot be impermanent. Something that is inherently existent has to be permanent. Why is that? Because if something is inherently existing, then that means it has the ability to exist by its own power, by its own entity, without depending on other factors. Something which is impermanent, it depends on other causes and conditions, other factors. So there is a contradictions, okay? If something is impermanent, that means that is always dependent on other factors, other conditions. On the other hand, if it's something inherently existence, then, because inherently existence means, be able to exist by its own entity, by its own power, without depending on other factors. And therefore, that kind of cannot be. And so therefore, it cannot, something that is permanent cannot be arising, abiding, and disintegrating. Okay, so can you see it? Yeah, so that is the point here making. So in the Chandragiri's commented middle way, another fault will be if they are inherently existing one, then, as Chandrakirti explained there in his writing, we will not be able to remember our past. Sentient being will not be able to remember their past. Okay? Because, so then there is fault of not being able to remember their past. The reason is why we remember past is because there is continuity of our mind, consciousness, the self and the consciousness. Because we have that continuity, therefore we are able to remember something. Okay? And that continuity is, one moment of self or one moment of mind lead to another moment, and there is continuity of many moments that allow us to have information on other moments from the past. They are all kind of related. All these moments are related. Do you get it? But if something is inherently existence, then they don't depend on each moment. If they depend on each moment, then that show is not inherent existence, it's independent. They depend on other factors, other conditions. Okay, and so because if you say it is inherent existence, then each of those moments will not depend on each moment, and if you don't have depend on each moment, they are unrelated. And so when they are unrelated, how can you say you remember something which is unrelated? We are able to remember things because there's a relation between our present consciousness and past consciousness. There's a relation between that. So that is where another point here making is, as Chandrakirti makes, is that you will have a problem of, you cannot say that then someone remember their past. Whether we talk about past life or even in this life, I cannot talk about me remembering when I was young. If my present self, is inherently existence, then I cannot say I remember when I was child, young, because there's no connection between that. Those different moments, there's no relation between those moments. Just as I cannot remember someone's memory. Do you get it? I cannot remember Mommy Max when Mommy Max was young. Whatever different things happen in her life, I cannot remember that because it's a different consciousness, different self, totally separate in that way. And so they're similarly like that, so that is where it. So here, of course, the example giving is like Devadatta, which is the Buddha's cousins. When he remembered, his past, a former life, he does not remember I was Yasna Dada, who's continuing this because it is another person, not the same continuity of the persons. So, and so there will be that problems, faults and problem of not being able to remember if it is in it. So then again, if any questions arises, but even like in a prasangika point of view, how can you say you remember your past because each moment is arising and disintegrating, moment by moment, because it's impermanent, moment by moment it's changing, and therefore moment by moment is arising and moment by moment is disintegrating. So if that is the case, then, how can you say that, wouldn't that have contradictions also in your school or in your system as well, That wouldn't be the case in a prasangika point of view, even though it is disintegrating, arising and disintegrating moment by moment, but each moment are related. Each moment have related. Each moment have relationship dependent on that. And because of that relationship, still they can recollect and remember, and that is valid to be able to remember because of that connection. Here, the negation is that if it's inherent existence, there wouldn't be any connections between those different moments. One moment it arises, one moment disintegrate, and next moment arise, disintegrate, and each of those moments become independent, unrelated, not dependent. And so therefore, it will not be able to say, remember past one, but in these cases, it wouldn't be because they are related in that. And so here is saying, next one, G, some people being not being able to understand this, not have these realizations, then they think the Buddha and his former life as ordinary beings, they are permanent. Why? They have to say because they think each moment it arises and disintegrate. Each moment that is the cases, and it become impermanent. Then each moment it arises and is disintegrate. And then how can you say you remember something which is something has been totally arise and integrated? And so therefore they have to proceed and they have to say is it permanent. And that is one of the things, like some of the early school of the thoughts, some of the non-Buddhist early school of thought, that is why they say self is permanent. That is why they say the self is permanent, because if self is not permanent, if it's impermanent and it is arising, disintegrating, how can we have your next life as a kind of continue to that same persons, So they have difficulty of that understanding that, and therefore they believe that it's permanent, and so whereas the Buddhist school of thought, is impermanent, even though it is momentarily arising and disintegrating, still you can remember because you have connection with each of those moments. Each of those moments, it has that connection. So therefore, you don't have to proceed, it is a permanent. Yes. Yes, Matthew, you have some questions?
The idea of the alaya consciousness, that is considered, or is the challenge with that is that is posited as inherently existent, as not changing. Is that correct?
Yes. Even the Mind Only School, who come with this concept of eight consciousness, and that the eighth one being the alaya, or the mind basis of all. Even that, from their point of view, they still assert that is inherently existence. So from Prasangika point of view, it will have same problems, Okay. By looking from the Prasangika point of view, it's still, even you come with that consciousness, something else, but still, because you assert as inherently existing, you will have same fault and same problems.
Okay, so I guess that is my question. I'm just confirming that that point of view asserts that the alaya is inherently existent.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
All right, thank you. That clarifies a question that I've had about that for some time. I appreciate it.
Yes, that they assert that is inherently existence. Yeah. Yeah, I maybe I don't want to go too much. Then again, I thought of thinking of the mind school thought. They explain three objects, and then two objects inherently existing, one object non-inherently existence. So yeah, so okay. But then even though they use one of object non-inherently existing, but still sometimes, even though they use same word, but sometimes the meaning of is different. For example, all the Buddhists use same term, dependent arising, but the meaning of dependent arising very different in sense. In some of the school of thought, the dependent arising very gross understanding of dependent arising, whereas Prasangika understanding of dependent arising much more subtle than the gross, and so therefore again, so there are many terms like that. Even though they use some same term, but the meaning becomes slightly different, I guess maybe even in our cases, sometimes I think people translate, sin, negative karma as a sin. And even though we are using same concept word, but the concept of sin in Christianity and the concept of sin in Buddhism is very different. Even though we might be using same words, hell beings, hell realms, is absolutely very different. What it means, absolute is almost like opposite, One is internal permanent and one is impermanent, even, so is kind of opposite, One is permanent and one is impermanent. But of course, we can be using same term. And so therefore also we have to realize how terms are used differently by different school of thoughts, even though they are using same terms. And even in one school of thought, sometimes how they use differently in different contexts, Yeah. So here at the end of that, that's G, where certain people assert Buddhas and ordinary being as being one and permanent is extreme view. So then at the very end of that, it says, in order not to fall in the view, you need to understand well the particular manner of remembering in which at the time of remembering, you remember the I in general without making distinguish in the term of specific country, time, and nature of life. So what it means is, sometimes again, they talk about two self, okay? So we are not talking about this two self, that one self exists, that the self that does not exist. That is one way of putting. But even within the self that exists, they are two different. One self is very specific, like for say, let's say Geshe Sherab, okay? Geshe Sherab, when I talk about Geshe Sherab, I'm talking about this male monk in this southern world that was born in my father, mother's, in certain countries, So I have this identification of who I am because of the country that I was born with, the parent family that I was born, in terms of gender, in terms of my educations, in terms of my upbringing, in terms of, my ordination. There is one self, that self. That self does not continue. Do you get it? Once I die, there's no more continuity of that Geshe Sherab who was born in that family, who was a monk, who was a male, all of that. That self only exists for one lifetime. But there is a general sense of self without identifying with all of this. Okay, without identifying as a male, as a monk, as a Geshe, as a born in that, but there is just a general sense of just a self without identifying all of that. That is the what that goes through life after life, and that is what we remember. And so that is where that's where the distinguishing making, there are two types of self. The general self, there's on the basis of aggregate merely labeled self, and then there is one self which is identified with many specific, in this life. And so when we talk about, we are not talking about continuity of that specific self that is identifying with, as I mentioned, all of that, but general self. So I think that is another thing that for us to remember, to be able to distinguish again through those different self. One self that stop at the end of our life, and one self that continue. So that is the meaning of that when it says. Another fault, the second fault is, so then the karma that we have created will be wasted because, if it is inherently existence, the self of this, the self, this self and the future self are unrelated. If it is inherently existence, they are unrelated. If they are not unrelated, then the karma that I create now will not be experienced by the continuity of me in the future. Okay, let's say I create a lot of karma, positive karma, negative karma. Then next life, I take a rebirth as an animal or as a human beings, whatever. That animal or that human beings will not experience the karma that I've created in this life because they are, inherently existence. And because they are inherent, they are unrelated. If they are unrelated, then we cannot experience. Just like I cannot experience the karma created by Bob, good karma, bad karma, karma that created by Bob, I cannot experience that. We are totally separated, there's no related in our continuity in that. And so therefore, similarly, the person who is going to experience the future and the person who is created karma now is totally different. And so therefore, there is no one who is going to experience the karma which you have created now. So that means your karma that you have created will be wasted or will not be experienced the result of that by anyone. Do you get it? The meaning, the point? Yeah. If let's say when we talk about many lifetime, okay, we are talking about when we talk of many lifetime. So for example, I'm experiencing the result of some of the karma I'm experiencing a result of this life, my action in this life, and some of the result that I'm experiencing of from the karma from the past. Okay. And I experienced the karma from the past because the person who created the karma in the past and me is the same continuity. So that is why I'm able to experience the karma of the past, because it is the same continuity. Okay, the consciousness is same continuity, the self is same continuity. Same way, the karma that I'm creating now, if I don't experience this life, I will experience in the future. And who will experience that in the future? The continuity of me. Continuity of my consciousness, continuity of me will experience that. From Prasangika point of view, from our point of view, this system point of view. But if you accept the self to be, one entity, same with the aggregate, then that you believe that the self is inherent existence. If you believe self is inherent existence, then you cannot say there is a connections. There is you cannot say it is same continuity. Okay? Because if it's same continuity, it means many moments of those continuity depending on each other, related with each other. And if it's inherently, it cannot be that. Each moment is different. Each moment does not depend on each moment, other moments. Each of moments are independent, unrelated with each moment. And therefore, the future me will not experience the action that I've created. And that means the action I've created now would be wasteful because there's no one to experience in the future. So that is the point that it's making. And then, and the other faults, will be, the other fault will be, the problem or fault will be, one will experience result that we are not created. Why? Because again, if it's something inherent in existence, the previous myself, the past myself and present myself, they are unrelated. They become unrelated, unconnected. And if they are unrelated, unconnected, then, all the experience I'm experiencing of karma are being experienced by someone who is totally different and unconnected from someone who is created before. And so therefore that would be. Yes, Bob, you have something to say?
Yeah, I think for many people, I think that they don't understand what it means to be inherently existent and why something that's inherently existent, has to be permanent, can't change, why it has to be disconnected from everything else. And I think for many people, the notion of inherent existence is sort of a strange one. And I wonder if you could maybe add some words of explanation for what inherent existence means and why it has this property of being disconnected from other things and so forth.
Yeah, when you have this concept, inherent means by it has its own ability or potential power by its own self without depending on others, without depending on other factors, other conditions. And something that is not dependent on other factors, other conditions, then, doesn't depend on anything. Moment to moment, cause, other factors, anything. And so therefore, that is where it, in other words, inherent existence and independent existence have same meaning here, okay? Inherent existence and independent existence have same meaning. And something that is independent existence means that is independent, so it doesn't depend on any other factors for its existence, any other conditions, any other factors for others. And therefore, something that depends on others, conditions, factors, that cannot be inherent existence, independent existence. But when we see, when we talk about past, future life, we are talking about, many moments which are related with each others. Not the independent, but dependent moments of that. And that will not be possible. That will be not possible. So again, I don't know, either I made it clear or either I make it more complicating. But maybe Bob, you might have someone, you have something to add to make it clear.
Yeah, for me, when I understand how things are inherently existent, it sort of means it's sort of hard for me to think about how anything in our world could ever possibly be inherent existence, because inherent existence means it has this notion of existing from its own side. And if something exists from its own side, it's, if you like, self-contained. And that's why it doesn't depend on anything else, because it creates its own existence. So therefore, it doesn't require any cause to bring it into existence. It continues on its own forever without worrying about anything else, because it causes itself to continue itself forever. And for that reason, if something were inherently existence, it would have to be permanent, and it could never change, because it would just cause itself to be the same thing over and over again forever. And therefore, that's why it's independent of everything else. And I think the way it comes in is that for most of us, we sort of think we have this permanent self that continues on from life to life. And it sort of seems almost like it, it never changes. Maybe we take on a body or different bodies or something, but there is some permanent something. I mean, and the Christians might call it a soul, but there's something deep inside of us that we call a self that does seem to have this permanent fixture. It just continues on and on forever. So in that sense, when it comes to the notion that maybe a self is inherently existent, but again, like I say, anything that's inherently existent wouldn't be normal in our world, because everything in our world changes. And if something is inherently existence, it just creates its own existence over and over again, and it never changes. So I don't know if that helps at all, but anyway, that's sort of how I think about it.
Yeah, another way is like when there is a change, okay, in anything, why does change happen? Because there is some change in some conditions, some factors. That is the only reason why it changes, isn't it? Whether it's external or whether internal world. If there is some changes, why is there change? We have to analyze. Why is there change? There is change because there is some change in the conditions. There's some change in some other factors, some conditions. That is the only reason why something changed. But if something is independent or inherent existence that doesn't depend on other factors, other conditions, therefore there's no reason to change it. There's nothing that could make it changes because it doesn't depend on any other factors, other conditions. And therefore that is why it has to be permanent, you know. I don't know again whether it helped or not. So that is so the three kind of, you know, fault is one, you will not remember the past fault. Second is that your karma will be wasted. And thirdly, you will experience karma that you have not created, which is against the very concept of the karma. You know, you only experience what you have created. So all, if we accept the self to be inherently existence, then all this fall will happen, you know. So the next one, if it's not one inherent existence, one with the aggregate, then the other possibility, the fourth point is that it is inherently different or separate from the aggregates. So if it is inherently separate or different or distinguished from the aggregates, what is the problem? Isn't it different? Isn't it separate? Isn't it? So that is the way it is. So then according to that, you know, then again, in the root text of the wisdom in Nagarjuna's work, again, you know, it says, you know, if they were different, if the self is inherently, it's not just talking about different or separate. We are talking about inherently existing different and inherently existing separate. If that is the cases, then, you know, the aggregate will not have the characteristic or attribute of the compounding phenomena, and that compounding phenomena arises, abide, and disintegrate. Okay, that is the nature of compounding or conditioned phenomena, or we call impermanent phenomena. Okay, so it means same. We call it compounding phenomena or conditioned phenomena or impermanent phenomena. Condition compounding mean is compounded or conditioned by cause and conditions. Impermanent means is never staying same, ever changing. So the word can be kind of have a different meaning, but it means same thing. You know, it's just each different word give a slightly different nature or different contribute of that same object. So yeah, so that is, so here it is like, it is saying, you know, here, like horse and ox, you know, the ox and horse are totally kind of different, okay? They are totally different. So the ox does not have the characteristic of the ox. Ox does not have characteristic of the horse. Horse does not have the characteristic of the ox, okay? So because they are so completely unrelated, different, completely separate, and so that will be the case with that. And if it does not have that compounding characteristic or nature or attribute, then, you know, the problem will that the aggregate will not be able to be a basis of the self, you know, the basis of the self when we talk about the innately holding a self, when it is self, that self is merely imputed on the basis of aggregate. That self is merely imputed on the basis of aggregate. And when that aggregate has some that characteristic, then that aggregate become permanent. And something that is permanent cannot be a basis for something which is impermanent. Or something which is impermanent, the basis of that impermanent cannot be permanent, And so therefore, that is the, and then, there's, for instance or example, flower in the sky and nirvana, flower in the sky is very classical kind of example, not existence, You find in a lot of Indian classical scriptures, the example of non-existence is like flower in the space, because maybe that example might change in the future when in the space we started to gardening. When we started to garden in the space, maybe, then there is flower in the space. Maybe then the example might have to change. And another example is, the horn in a rabbit, the horn of the rabbit, example, and then it will come the child of the barren women or mothers. So those are the example of non-existence. So that is where. So then again, moreover, if it exists in the D, next one, inherently different from characteristic of aggregate, suitable as form and form, it will to be observed as such, just as for instance, form and the mind are observed as differently. Since it is not such apprehension, though the self does not exist as something factually others. So, if there is, just as we can easily distinguish, well, I don't know, we can say easily distinguish between the mind and the form, for a lot of people, they cannot distinguish that, for a lot of them, mind is just a wave of whatever, probably they still think it is some sort of form, physical form, but from Buddhist point of view, they are totally different. Form is physical matter, and mind is formless matter, not matter, formless. So something which is form and something which is formless is totally very different. And in that way, we should be able to, if the self and aggregate are inherently different, then we should be able to see like that, to be able to distinguish and to be able to see that so separately. But that is it is not the case. We cannot see it. We cannot, so that is where it is. If they are inherently existing different, then they will have no connections, basically. They will have no connections. The self and aggregate will have no connections. If there is no connection between the self and its aggregate, then there wouldn't be self. Because without the aggregate, there is no self. The self is imputed on the basis of the aggregates. So when there is no basis to be imputed, then there is no self. So therefore, there wouldn't be self, and you wouldn't even say the aggregate of the self, because when you say aggregate of the self is when you say my body, my mind is based on that, there is me. On the basis of that, then it is my mind and mine. And so therefore, when one of them does not exist, the other cannot exist. And so therefore, then we would have to say, there's no self, there's no aggregate, and so that become a problem. Because there will be unconnected, unrelated between the aggregate of the self and the self, because it will be inherently existing different, and totally unrelated. if that is the case, if someone hit on my body, there is no reason for me to feel someone hit me. That body and that me is unrelated. When someone hit my body, I shouldn't be feeling I was hit. It hit the body, not me. You see, because they are unrelated. But at the moment, when someone hit my body, I say someone hit me because they are related, connected. When my mind is unhappy, I say I'm unhappy. If they are unrelated, unconnected, unrelated, then there's no reason when someone's, someone I don't know, anyone whose mind is unhappy, I wouldn't feel I'm unhappy. Why? Because there's no connection in that. Unrelated. That person's mind and myself. Or someone push someone body and push them, I wouldn't feel someone push me because it's unrelated. Same way, when someone push my body, I shouldn't be feeling I'm being pushed if it's unrelated. So there are all these faults, Also same thing, when your mind is good, you feel you are good. When your mind is compassionate, then you feel I'm more compassionate. When your mind is more aggressive, you feel I'm more aggressive. All this wouldn't be possible because all of this mind, the aggregate of those mind and the self is totally unrelated, totally unconnected. So we will have all these problems, So that is why. So through that kind of analysis, that kind of investigation, then we come to conclusion, the self is neither inherently existing one with the aggregate, neither is inherently existing separate, and therefore is not inherently existence. Because if it is inherently existent, either it has to be one with the inherent existence, one with the aggregate, or inherent existence, either one or separate from the inherent. Because it is neither of them, therefore the self or the person is not inherent existence or is empty of inherent existence. So that is the one final conclusions. After all this kind of analysis, investigation, reasoning, and investigation, you come to that conclusion. There's absolutely no inherent existence self at all. That is the way the conclusions of the meditation should lead. So therefore, in E, the important gain is gaining certainty with respect to such reasoning, where it says you should train in order to gain firm certainty, total convincence and certainty, which sees that such reasoning, with all many different reasons, different faults, if it is one with inherently one with aggregate, many faults if it is inherently separate from the aggregates, or with all of those reasoning, damage as self-existent as entity different from the aggregate, because you have not induced this pure crushing certainty with respect to two sides of sameness and difference. The conclusions that the person do not inherently exist will be mere thesis, so that you do not gain the pure view. So then we would not be able to have realizations of emptiness or the pure view or the ultimate, unless we have certainty with all these different points that we just made. From the four essential points, the second point, certainty with that, there's no third possibility or no third alternative apart from if it's inherent, either it has to be inherent one or inherent separate. And then through different reasoning of how there are many faults, if it is inherent existing ones, then come to conclusions, absolutely is not inherent existing one with the aggregate. Then other possibility is that it is, if it is not one inherent existing one, then it might be inherent existing separate or different or distinct from that. And if that is the case, again, many faults are there, and through those faults and reasoning, then you come to a conclusion, certainty that is neither inherently existing different from the aggregates. And because now is not inherently existing one or neither different with the aggregates, therefore it is absolutely is no inherently existing at all. Absolutely no inherently existing at all. So then that, yes, Rowena, you want to say something?
It seems to me that it's like, maybe I'm sort of sidetracking here, but without all this change, without all the way you've just described things, we wouldn't be alive at all anyway. So we say, you know, it goes back to just the very nature of the way things exist. And we're talking about the things that are alive and going through samsaric changes. But if you just obliterate all that and say, well, that can't possibly happen, then where's life, you know? Maybe that's just simple thinking.
Personally, you know, I think so that yeah. Personally, for me, you know, when I try to kind of course, you have to study those details as much as possible. But when you meditate, you know, I think sometimes I try to kind of condense it, you know. So for me, you know, if it is inherently existing one with the aggregates, then I try to think that way. Either it has to be inherently existing with the body aggregate or mind aggregates. For me, that's help more. Instead of actually generalizing general aggregate itself, I kind of divide into that. If it is inherently existing one with the aggregate, then it should be either one with the physical aggregate or it should be either one with the mental aggregate. And then if it is one with physical aggregate, then again, same logic, it will be unseparatable, indivisible, one. And if that is the cases, then, you know, there wouldn't be a concept of me, the self who is experiencing, and then my aggregate, my body aggregate, which I'm saying, you know, again, normally we have this sense of my body, there's something like the self as the agent or as the subject or the one who is experiencing, and my body which belong to that is being experienced. So there's a sense of separate. That will be not possible. That will be not possible. And so therefore, the one who is experiencing and that what is being experienced will be same. If they are same, then there is problem. As Nagarjuna said, the actions and the person who's creating the subject of the action become one. And the one who is experiencing and that's something to be experienced, they all become one. And then if that is the case, then there will be a lot of problem in our conventional world, you know. Then you cannot say, oh, you know, he or she is experiencing something, because you cannot differentiate, because that someone is experiencing and that what is being experienced, they become same, one. The action, who is creating action, the action become one. And so therefore, one fault, it has that, you know, so, and secondly, you know, for me, it helped, you know, if the self and the aggregate, the physical aggregate are one, you know, then another problem is, you know, when our aggregate stop at the end of our life and when it's cremated, there's no continuity of that body anymore. even though it has become ash and something is left over, but there's no more body. And so when that stop, also then you would say there's no continuity of the self as well, because they are one, same,
Yeah.
independently one, same. If body and the, no, that is what, if the body and the, if your physical body and the self is one, that is the problem you will have. Then when your body is cremated and there's no continuity of body, then you will have to also say there's no continuity of the self as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there is no continuity of self, then there is no past, future life.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's no past, future life, no, I'm not saying to ruin, I'm not answering your questions, okay? I'm just I'm just saying that when you meditate, you can kind of summarize. And there are different ways of summarizing. Sometimes when we read all of this, sometimes you can get lost. And so when you meditate, you try to kind of summarize and condense it, not to lost the meaning, but without going all. And so that is where when I do that, for me, that I do that way, and it helps. And also, if there is no past and future, then your karma that you have, actions you have created now will be wasted, because there is no one to experience in the future, because there is no continuity of self to experience that. And also, I will be experienced a lot of consequences of something that I have not created in this lifetime, because there is no past that my continuity has created, but I'm experiencing some of the things from the past which I've not created. So then again, then that doesn't happen. Another way of doing, if there is one with my body aggregate, then what is my body aggregate? It's the self with one with my scalp, my face, if you go each body, from which of them is the self. And then if each of those different organs and different parts are the self, then there will be too many self. But if it is not, if it is just one of those body part is the self, that one part of the body self cannot function as a body. It is not a functioning body, so it can't be body. So therefore, it can't be body and self oneness in that. And through that kind of analysis, then you come to the conclusion, definitely it is not one with our physical aggregate. If it's not one with the physical aggregate, there's possible, the other possible is that is one with the mental aggregate. Again, you use the same analysis. If it is same with physical mental aggregates, there will be problem just like that, again, when we think of my experience, my feeling, my body, my mind, again, there is a sense of self as someone who is experiencing, and the consciousness as someone that is being experienced. If they become one, if they become one, then there is many problems, there will be many problems. Then again, the actions and the action doer become one, and so again, so there are many problems. Another problem will be, just as there is only one self, there will be only one mental state, because they are same. Or just as there are many mental states, such as, primary consciousness, 51 mental factors, there will be 51 self. Or we can do in many different ways, according to that, the 7 different type of the valid and invalid cognitions. There are 7 types. So just as there is 7 type of minds, then there will be 7 persons, self. Or just as there's only one person, there will be only one set of mind, and there wouldn't be many of that. So again, it doesn't that. And even we say, let's say, even within the consciousness, whether it's a virtuous consciousness, non-virtuous, or neutral consciousness, whether it's a gross level of mind, subtle level, more subtle, but whatever, even that mind is made of many moments. Is each of those moments the self? If each of those moments are self, one consciousness is made of many moments, so there will be many self. But if each of them are not, if among many moments, if one moment is the self, one moment of consciousness is self, then again, it can't be, because that one moment does not have the ability to conceive the object without the other moments. Just one moment cannot able to conceive the objects without other moments. So therefore, it cannot be consciousness if it cannot conceive the object. It cannot be self if it cannot conceive the objects. And so therefore, when you do all this analysis, then you come to conclusion is also not one with the mental consciousness. So if it's not one with physical consciousness, I mean physical aggregates, and if it's not one with the mental aggregates, so therefore it can't be one with the aggregates. Inherently existing one with the aggregates. So then the other possibility is separate from the aggregates, inherently separate. If it is inherently separate from the aggregate, if you take away your physical consciousness and mental and physical aggregate and mental aggregate, can you just point and say this is self? And this is the self, and this is here and where? You cannot point. You cannot really, if you look, you cannot find anywhere. When you take away your physical and mental aggregate away, apart from that, you cannot find so-called me, self. And so therefore, it is neither inherently separate from the self or inherent, and therefore, since it's not inherently one and neither it is inherently separate, therefore it can't be inherently existence. And so I think that is the kind of the conclusions. So you see, I think with that, all the point is met here are there, but I think it's slightly different way of doing it without being too lost. And is kind of contents, summarizing. I don't know, with you, how it, but personally, I find helpful in doing that. And okay, there is one question. What is an example of something inherent existence? Unfortunately, there is no example of inherent existence because there is no inherent existence at all. So therefore, we cannot find example of inherent existence because it is non-existence. So yeah, from Buddhist point of view, there's nothing that exists inherently. Nothing, there's nothing. Neither self is inherently existing, neither our aggregate are inherently existing, neither external objects, internal objects. There's nothing that exists inherently. From Buddhist point of view, everything's dependent arising, dependent originations. Dependent arising, dependent originations, and inherent existence are contradictions. So everything is interconnected, interrelated, interdependent. So there is nothing that is not interdependent, not interrelated, not interconnected. If there is something that is inherently existent, then there will be something that is not interconnected, not interrelated, not interdependent. And so from Buddhist point of view, the Buddha said, there's nothing that is not interdependent. And so therefore, there is nothing that is inherently existence. Okay. So yeah, then I think maybe we can do the dedication, unless someone has some questions or some comments. otherwise, yeah. So again, we went through that. Again, you have to, at the end, you have to come to the what is the main point of this and the meditation. You have to know exactly what the meditation is, instead of being lost in some kind of philosophy and discussions and some kind of, I think it's very important at the end of all of those different points, reasoning, we all have to come to summarize how to meditate, contents and how to meditate, and how that meditation helps in dealing with our delusions, and I think we will continue as it will come later. Okay, then we'll do the dedications. Gyawadi nyodo da lama sangye tu gyone dowa chi jama leba ke sala kwe ba sho chanjo sem choren bo che ma ke pa na ke kyo che ke wa nyam ba me ba yang. We can do long life prayers. Maybe we can skip that one. The wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparable kind in Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Tuzo changshin jamguen jawe ten zinjong bebe kunso to koroze choson kuwe le ma tujo a do je da so do je guen do sha ten shou. Venerable One, to you whose kindness exists that of all composure for those wanderers in far-off places, especially the West, mindful of your loving concern for us, in intention of descending again into a family of far distant land, we make this request, O Lama, please live long. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night, and I hope you didn't get more confused before you came to class. Before you came to class, you are no confusion. Now you are living with a lot of confusions, but I guess maybe it's a good you started to think about it to clear the confusions. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Geshe.